We are all story makers of our own lives. However, a teacher has the unique ability to influence the lives of so many others. With that in mind, we spoke to Mr. Debashis Chatterjee, the director of I Am Koekor, and also a very well known education visionary. Debashish has also authored many books, and one of his latest book, Leadership Chronicle, promises to decode the deep secrets of management. It is a must read. Without further ado, let's speak to Mr. Debashish. So, welcome, Mr. Chatterjee, to Storymakers Podcast,
Thank you.
a place where we speak to professionals like you and go through your journey to really inspire many others. Papya, over to you.
Welcome once again, Debashish. So the first question that I had for you, of course, is something that you've been talking about of late, about India becoming an hub for innovation. And my question is that, do we Indians do better when it comes to being doers, or are we not very good thinkers? And what do you think some of the steps that one can take to change this perception?
Well, you rightly said that this is only a matter of perception. The dichotomy between doing and thinking is a false dichotomy. It doesn't make sense. When you look at all the global multinationals where Indians are at the helm, whether it's Satya Nadella or Pichai, you see this companies are companies which are empires of the mind. They are not empires of physical structure, they're empires of the mind. And so if these Indians can run such big empires of the mind, trillion-dollar companies, then it makes no sense to say that we are doers, we are not thinkers. The real point is that the culture of innovation, the culture of setting up big organizations is also a perspective that you have of the world. Suppose you're a graduate of MIT or Harvard, you will immediately think of a global scale company. If you have an idea in MIT, I used to know that, I was teaching a course on leadership at the Harvard Kennedy School. There's some MIT grads who would whisper to each other, this is a big idea, let's register the company tomorrow and let's scale up. So they're thinking scale from day one. You have Indian organizations. Think of this wonderful brand called Limca, used to thrive on. Think of Hotmail, think of Bisleri. They could have been global brands. But why did we sell out? Because we didn't have the courage to say that we can pursue this. Because the culture of innovation that says we must grow continuously, we must innovate, we must cross different geographies, mind barriers, geographical barriers. Now, those things were never part of our thinking. See, for the average intelligent Indian, innovation, entrepreneurship were a far cry. And only in recent years have we had this, what you call tech leadership. If you're an entrepreneur, you couldn't be considered a leader. It's like another shopkeeper. Yeah. And you had to be the IAS or the IITs, IIMs. And so the point I'm trying to make here is this, that it is the culture that drives these organizations to go beyond their shores and become global entities. And it is a culture that says we are forever going to expand. We are the world. And this is the culture. You don't confine your idea or a project or a product to a national geographical limitation. You're thinking of scale of a certain kind. The thing is that the audacity to think big, the ability to execute, and the ability to go beyond boundaries, national boundaries, cultural boundaries, is not so foreign to Indians per se, but it is foreign to our culture in the sense that we are conservative. We have to secure our future because this insecurity that comes from a colonized mentality that says that you're not good enough. That belief, it takes about 50 to 100 years for that belief system to change. So once you realize that you're just big enough, good enough, you run these kind of companies, there's obviously a change in culture. And when there's a change in culture, there's greater audacity. And when there's greater audacity, not misplaced audacity which is well informed based on evidence, you are going to begin to create those empires of the world. See, my new book talks about globalizing Indian thought. When I was asked, how can you globalize Indian thought in Kundamangalam in Kerala? It says, look, in Kundamangalam, Kerala, where I am Kozhikode is located, we admit 400 students out of 300,000 plus that have applied for CAT this year. India is 1/6 of humanity of the world. And I am aspirant is about, 1 out of a million people in India can be an aspirant. And those who make it to IIM will be a small sliver of their talent pool. So you're sitting on top of a hill with the world's best talent pool, and you say you can't globalize these ideas, emanating from the soil. It's a matter of knowing how good you are.
Bashish, from what you said, does it mean that we need more confidence in our abilities and that in turn will translate into greater risk-taking abilities?
Yeah, the thing is that what you consider to be risk from one perspective is considered as venture in another perspective. The fact that you use the word risk simply means that you're hedging your bets. You're not very sure that it's going to pay off. And if you're going to start any venture with that kind of a diffidence, you're not going to succeed. It's very obvious. So I can't be tentative and say this is risky. If I was risky, why am I doing it? A lot of people say, they modify the word by saying you must take calculated risk. Come on. Risk is not a function of calculation, it's a function of conviction. And when it is conviction, it is not a risk, it is a venture. And in venture, there are successes, there are failures, but venture you must. And if you don't venture, where will you be able to create wealth? Yeah.
That's so true. That is so true. So, a little bit about coming back to your journey. It's very, very rare to find somebody so successful in the teaching line and at the same time have such a strong entrepreneurial wing to it. Especially if you look at the journey, the way you have grown and going to the level that it is today. So earlier, when you were deciding on your career path, was there something other than teaching that you really considered, something like starting a business? And if you did, what stopped you?
I was condemned or destined to be a teacher. I was born on Teacher's Day, September 5. And when my father saw my horoscope, most Bengali, we have a orientation of what my son is going to be like. And the horoscope said he'll either be an artist or he'll be a businessman. And my father told my mother, this is what your son will be, because he had an abiding faith in horoscopes. And so I neither became a businessman nor quite an artist. But what I realized that I became a little bit of both, because fundamentally what you recognize is that this entrepreneurial streak, or whatever you call it. My father he started many things, printing press, a tea garden. He invested in many things, and he failed in most of his ventures. But then he was indomitable. And so the point is, the thing is that the entrepreneurial bug is always in you. And you realize that it is not just teaching and learning that you're doing here. You're converting population into human capital.
Yes.
Every year you're sending out this supreme talent to the world to create wealth. So I don't see myself in the business of teaching, learning alone. I see myself in the business of wealth creation, the romance of wealth creation. Can you imagine a wealth that is generative in nature? You're sending out a student who will head Microsoft. So I have often been asked, what would be your finest achievement as a teacher? I said, when my student becomes the Prime Minister of India, I would have achieved my goal, right? So from a teacher's perspective, it is generative capacity that makes wealth creation not just a terminal issue, makes wealth creation an ongoing process of life. So in a teacher's life, there is no end to wealth creation.
Since our podcast is more geared towards entrepreneurs and you have taken so many new projects over the years, just wanted to understand that when you are starting or thinking of a new project at IM or otherwise, what are some of the key considerations that you take? What are the key factors that you evaluate about the success during the planning of that project?
Yeah. So the thing is that, as I said earlier, that you don't start any project with diffidence. You start with optimism. First of all, what I would do is figure out whether my expertise is flexible enough to reach out to those stakeholders who understand the value of my expertise. And so the venture has to be based on not just expertise that you have, but on the ability to communicate the value of that expertise to people who will pay for your product or service. The thing is, you look at a guy in Ahmedabad railway station, he's polishing his shoes. And while he's polishing his shoes, he's carrying a copy of the English edition of Times of India. So obvious question you have is, a guy who knows how to read in English, why would he still polish shoes in India? So you walk up to him and you ask him, Aapko pata hai? Do you know how to read Times of India in English? He said, no, I don't know how to read English. Why are you carrying this newspaper? He said, the person whose shoe I polish, he gets bored, so I give him a copy of the Times of India and he reads it and he pays me an extra tip for उनका दिल बहलाने के लिए. And so now look at what he's thinking. See, he has expertise, which is to polish his shoes. But he has flexibility of expertise, be able to reach out, communicate a value proposition that goes way beyond expertise, right? So you have to look at your product or service from the angle of the user, the final user, the last mile. Most of us don't do that thorough check. So I may have written a book, but how many people will read the book? I decided on writing a book called Invincible Arjuna. And we said, who will read Invincible Arjuna from a management professor? What does Arjuna got to do with management? I said, look, I just checked the data points and I realized that in 2012, the number one name for boys in India was Arjun. Now, if there are so many boys whose name is Arjun, if their fathers buy a copy of the book, it is written in a language that they can gift this book to their son, the book has sold as many copies. Even if I get a fraction of that market share. So I sold 70,000 odd copies of the book in first go. And so you can imagine the thing is that you have to understand you may be able to write anything, but the fact is it's going to be accessible. So can you cross the brain barrier? This is a conversation point where you're trying to sell an idea that appears very exotic. I think when you take an initiative means that you're initiating energy, product, service that has not been seen before, which means there is no precedence. And therefore, it is called an initiative. Now, if there is no precedence, you have to educate people with prior aspects of that precedence so that they can connect. Otherwise, you can be too far away from their comprehension. If you do that, then your product is not going to succeed. You have to be far enough for them to be enticed, but close enough for them to understand what you're enticing them about. But that's how most products go.
Yep.
I was talking to Sanjeev Goenka, and he's launching a new product with Ayurveda, this Chavanpras. The Chavanpras is not what young people of India like, the taste and all of that. So to make it palatable for young people, you give them a toffee which has elements of Chavanpras and it has got multiple tests, so you kind of make it palatable.
Debashis, the next question will come in from me. If I remember correctly, your book called You Can Teach Algebra to the Zebra was published sometime around 2015. And you talked about how one should learn to deal with uncertainty, to deal with the unknown. Given that, the pandemic happened a lot later when there was a lot of discourse on how one has to learn to deal with uncertainty, on effectuation and stuff like that. Do you think that your thought process has evolved over the years, so from 2015 to now? Is your thought right now similar to what you had, written in that book, or has it evolved given that we have the background of the pandemic behind us?
Yeah. The thing is, there is wisdom in uncertainty. Except that we don't see the wisdom, we see the emotional reaction to it. The thing is that when I wrote that book, it was written as a rhetorical question. Can you teach a zebra algebra? That was the title of the book. It is not as though I was giving an answer, I was asking a question, but it is a rhetorical question because the answer was obviously no, you can't teach a zebra algebra because the zebra doesn't have an intellect that can hold on to complex information for too long. Human beings have an intellect. So that is a question around intellect. The point is that what does uncertainty teach you? Uncertainty teaches you that the thinking of the past will not solve problems of the future. That is what uncertainty tells you. It's not about uncertainty, it's about your thinking, which has outlived its utility. And so the point is that you're still thinking in terms of the 19th century paradigm in education or business. You will not succeed in the 21st century. So most of our parents have not been socialized into a process where how do you hold a conversation about failure? Either we keep quiet as though somebody has died, you have not failed an exam, or I go vocal about it and start comparing with 20 other people. Either case, I'm not doing anything about the process. The great thing that Indian cricket has learned from Australia, I was the Australian High Commission, and the commissioner asked me, what should Australian higher education remember while they're talking to their Indian counterparts? I said, you should remember to be respectful of India. He said, why? I said, otherwise Indian higher education will do to Australian higher education what Indian cricket has done to Australian cricket. We will learn from you. We are better positioned geographically. We will learn from you what you did well, and we will beat you in your own game. And so that kept him thinking. What I recognize very clearly is that our major problem is essentially not just processing failures, but allowing that feedback loop to come and improve. I know, go back when Australia wins a cricket match, forget about losing, wins a cricket match, they go into a huddle and they ask, why did we win so easily? They don't ask, get us a bottle of champagne, let's celebrate. I mean, that comes much later, but they will process success with as much scrutiny as they will process failure, because it's not about success or failure. It's about getting the process right.
Having said that, Mr. Chatterjee, all of us as individuals, most of us have faced a certain setback, which has become like a blessing in disguise. That has become individually, we perhaps look within ourselves and
Yeah.
use that as a stepping stone. So, while in your book you mention something about your childhood, about the spelling circus, in your recent last 5 to 10 years, is there a setback or an experience that really made you look within and that gave you another stepping stone for what you will post that?
I've survived in the IM system. Despite not having got a single promotion, I was the youngest professional to be a director of an IIM. And I am the longest serving director of an IIM even now. And this is my third term. And I'm just wondering what made me survive this long. I never got a promotion in my life. Trust me, in IIMs, from assistant to associate professor is a selection process, not a promotion process. From associate to professor is also selection. Directorship is a selection. So I missed my promotion, my professional life, corporate life, because I was a little unruly. And I've never got a promotion ever since. It was always a selection. And so I recognized something, that one failure to get a promotion was good enough to understand that I'm not working for a promotion. I'm working for myself, bettering a process that will take my organization from point A to point B. And promotions, if they come, good. If they don't come, I mean, that's not the reason why I'm doing something. So the very rationale for doing work changed from a pursuit of a goal, exclusive goal, to pursuit of an excellent process. This taught me many things. It taught me that position has to be augmented with disposition. Just a position doesn't give you leadership. For this role, I can recall for you an interview that I had with, it appears in this book called Leadership Chronicles. I've chronicled this failure stories very
Yeah.
diligently. And so I was talking to a person who had recruited me for this job, and his name is Sridharan, the Metro Man of India. He asked me a question: what if I wanted to give you leadership of an IIM at an early age like that? I was in my early 40s. And I did not know who Sridharan was. I was in Singapore. I was dean of school. I said, you really don't give leadership. You don't give leadership to anyone. You can't give it to me either. You can only give me a position. And I have to earn that leadership bit.
In one of the interviews, you mentioned that, of course, you were asked on your choice of characters for the books that you've written, whether it's a Krishna or an Arjuna, even lessons from the Bhagavad Gita. And you were asked as to, why from religion. And you had said that it has delusional and therapeutic value. I pick the therapeutic value, and religion is the most powerful organization in the world. And I'm a student of that organization. I just want you to highlight for our listeners some of the essential insights from your exploration of this perspective, and if it has any takeaways for the future leaders.
It's not about religion per se. It's about the very essence that the scientific way of looking at the world. And science as a rule decodes nature outside in terms of precise cause and effect formula. That's what science is trying to do. It's trying to describe the world outside of yourself. Religion is trying to describe the world inside yourself in terms of cause and effect relationship. And these religious masters were absolute clear scientists. There are 3 laws of causality that our spiritual masters talked about. One is every cause, just see the clarity that they had. Every effect must have a cause before it. No effect comes to the cause, therefore look for the cause. Wherever there is smoke, there must be fire. Simple example. This is the inquiry of the Rishis of the Upanishads. And then the second aspect of cause effect relationship the Rishis talked about was that one cause can have million effects, infinite number of effects. So one seed can produce a whole forest. No, you have to understand what is a seed and what is a forest. And the generative capacity of seed can be infinite. So you have to figure out what is generative in a system, in a cause effect relationship. The third element that the rishis talked about is that when the cause is removed, nothing remains of the effect. If you remove the ocean, where are the waves? There can be a million waves, but the ocean is gone, there are no waves. And so you have to understand that they were looking at the world from the perspective of deep scrutiny of facts, evidences that they were seeing within themselves.
One last, very, very last question, since you mentioned that you're influencing so many minds every year. What is that one critical aspect that you wish every individual would carry when they are leading their lives and when they leave your institution specifically?
If that is one sentence, it will be stay awake. The thing is, most people are sleepwalking through their lives. They've got a job, they think they'll be forever. See, the moment you are awakened to your own realities, you'll not be misled into false steps. See, most of my students, I give them the analogy of the mountain. We are on 3 hills in Kozhikode. I said, in a mountain climbing, what is important are 2 things. One is the peak, the other is the next step. Because if you look only at the peak and you take a false step, you're gone.
Yeah.
But if you only look at the next step without reference to the peak, then your direction will be awry. So you need to have a bifocal view. You must be awake to 2 things. Where do you want to go? And the next step. Once you are aware of these 2 things, nothing else matters. The process will take care of itself. All right. So that's about it from my end.
Thank you so much. It has been such a pleasure to have you on the podcast. And
Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Debashis. It was lovely talking to you.